Alrighty, let's get started. So why don't we just do rapid fire elevator introductions. Alina, over to you to start, and then over to the other two.
Hi everyone, my name is Alina Pham. My Vietnamese name is Pham Thi Kieu Trinh, and I am the founder of AusVietBridge. We connect Australian Vietnamese investors and businesses. And last year was my first year stepping away to do entrepreneurship. My first company was called Ignite Her Spark, which was all about empowering and coaching culturally diverse women in particular to be able to own their voices and their stories.
Hi.
Philip.
Great. Hi, my name is Phil Dowler. I was lucky to have spent 10 years in Vietnam, where I lost my hair and changed the colour. And again, pretty fortunate, I spent 2 years in Ho Chi Minh City and 8 years in Hanoi, working at Australia's best university, RMIT, if I can say that. I upset half the audience. But I've been back in Australia now for the last 2 years, and I really love my time in Vietnam.
Well, I live in Vietnam. My name's Natalie Fairley. My hair's growing really well in Vietnam. The humidity does wonders for it. No, my name's Natalie Fairley. As I say, I live in Hanoi, but spent my first 3 years in Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh City and now Hanoi. I'm the current Vice President of AusCham, and I'm Managing Director of Ascending Strategies. Ascending Strategies is a strategic and governance-based advisory firm working with Vietnamese and Australian companies seeking market entry.
Before we start, I just want to say too, my company is a member of AusCham in Vietnam, and it truly is the most fun chamber of commerce in Vietnam. They throw great parties, great sundowners, and more importantly, you actually get to meet people. Yes. So I do recommend AusCham when you go to Vietnam. I'd like to maybe just, again, perhaps rapid fire answers from each of you. We heard from our previous panelists about some emerging opportunities in Australia, particularly aged care and I forget what the other one was, but technology. Sorry, Brian. I do remember you mentioned something about that. Anyways, but love to hear from you three about the opportunities in Vietnam. There's a lot of people wondering, how do I do more business there? How do I import products, export products? So Alina, maybe over to you to start. What's your take on that? One industry that is really hot right now?
I get asked this question all the time because it is a part of what I do for my business, AusVietBridge. We bridge Australian and Vietnamese investors and businesses together. So people are always wondering, what is that next industry that I want to get into? What's the next product that you want to be getting to Australia or Vietnam? But I think I'm going to lean into the manufacturing side, because a lot of people have the perception around Vietnam being the cheap place to go to do manufacturing because of labour costs and all, and we have a huge population, so the energy is there. But there's a lot of opportunities now in advanced manufacturing. So Vietnam is no longer seen as just the cheap labour and you can just set up a manufacturing company there and that's it. There's so much more opportunities there. Even with automotive parts, for example, there's a lot of batteries that were previously made in Taiwan that's being moved to Vietnam. Even Apple's thinking about going to Vietnam to do a lot more of their business there. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in higher level of manufacturing other than just the sewing and the clothes that we used to think of Vietnam to be great at.
Okay, so high-tech manufacturing, value-added manufacturing. Philip, same question to you. I can kind of guess what it is.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Over to you.
Actually, maybe a little bit and a little bit not. And probably two areas that I'll talk about today. And one is, I speak before about IT and the importance of IT, but also the importance of IT in agriculture. And so a little bit back to what you said. About 10, 15 years ago, there was some research done on drone technology in agriculture in Vietnam. And that was like a bit of a sky dream, not one really was too much interested in it, but now it's actually taking off. So think a little bit differently about how you'd actually work in the agricultural sector of Vietnam. It's not just rice fields anymore. It's actually about how you can use drone technology, how can you use IT to increase yield, crop yields, combat desalinity in the soil. So look at tech and drone technology. And the other area which is growing is actually aviation. So Vietnam is one of the largest aviation markets in the world now. So our sponsor here just a little while ago about Vietjet is growing. We've got Vietnam Airlines growing. We've got other players in that aviation space growing. They're expanding around the world. So there's a huge impact now, or huge growth in the aviation sector into Vietnam.
And Natalie, what clients are coming to you right now? What's the biggest demand?
Yeah, so look, I think one of the things I was just going to add on as well to the speakers is that what we're seeing certainly through the Chamber, so two things I can certainly share, and I got some statistics through the Australian Chamber of certainly what we're actually seeing on the ground, and then also what I'm seeing in my own business. But certainly in what we're seeing at the Australian Chamber of Commerce is just huge uptake as well in the tech and innovation space, and just like was shared with NAB, it's that talent and the variety of talent. You would have seen on those NAB slides the different categories of talent that are being sought out, and there's huge opportunity for growth. One of the other areas, the agri-tech space, I can certainly vouch for the fact that my children who go to the United Nations International School in Hanoi are learning that agricultural technology at the moment. So when you can start to see that the primary and secondary schools are trying to provide training in that space, you know it's emerging. The other areas that we're seeing through the Chamber are tourism, lots of opportunities for Melbourne-based companies in hospitality and tourism to still make their mark in Australia. Lots and lots of opportunity in that space. The renewables sector is significant. There's a lot of solar and wind power and a lot of technology associated with that is also in high demand. The other one that I would also say is if you do have a look at the comprehensive strategic partnership, you can look at the focus of the Vietnamese and Australian governments as to where they are placing funding and effort. And it is very, very detailed to the point of KPIs. So you can really determine, and one area that surprised me is professional services. So there is a real demand in professional services. I actually do work for FPT. They're a client of ours, FPT Australasia, and they have some incredible technology in the ESG space, but there is huge demand for ESG advisory, as well as legal, accounting and so forth. So we're seeing a real cross-section. And certainly, I'd just finish with one other thing. At the Australian Chamber, unlike a lot of the other foreign chambers, we have a pie chart, if you like, of the industry types that's got 20 different colours. So we don't have one dominant industry through our chamber. And what that says to us is there are a lot of Australians, a lot of Australian companies in Vietnam doing a lot of different things. And what that also means is that's ripe for Vietnamese company partnerships as well, which we'll come to later.
We've covered pretty much every industry, which is a great thing. I think there's tons of opportunities. So no matter what you're studying, what you're working on, what your experience lies in, I think Vietnam just wants to have great collaboration. So find these three after. I'm sure they'd love to collaborate with you. Let's talk more about like more practical business tips and common mistakes. So I'll start with Natalie here. I've had my share of horror stories doing business in Vietnam and elsewhere. I'd love to hear from you. You have much more diverse client base, most likely, who have encountered some challenges. And I think a lot of you here might be concerned about that too. You hear some of these stories, people will dissuade you about doing business in Vietnam or persuade you to. Natalie, what are those top couple kind of red flags to look out for that keep happening over and over again with your clients?
Yeah, sure. Well, when I first started, in this space, which was 2018 and 2019, probably, certainly even my own maybe market immaturity as well, was having worked for an Australian-based company when I was working in Melbourne. We had sold in that situation property, and we also did data valuation models. We'd sold and interacted with parts of Southeast Asia. Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Philippines. And so when I got to Vietnam, my employer actually, the immediate former employer and a past former employer said to me, never done anything in Vietnam. Could you just do what we did in those other markets in Vietnam? And it was the biggest mistake. it is a huge mistake. And I think it's developed a lot, but a huge mistake is assuming compatibility with other markets, number one, in Southeast Asia, and also not coming to Vietnam and getting on the ground and really developing intelligence, communication, partnerships and relationships. So we did it in 2019 for the first time with an Australian property developer, and they really, after that, probably set down a 3-year journey to immerse themselves in Vietnam. And it was, even I was surprised because I said, oh, just one trip and we're off and away. They are doing exceptionally well. They've just opened an office in Ho Chi Minh City, but it took 4 years. Yeah.
4 years. So don't rush it necessarily, but if you can, work with Ascend. Moving over to Philip. Philip, you've encountered, I'm sure, your share of challenges and opportunities. 10 years was it, I think, in Vietnam, RMIT. For those of you that don't know the story of RMIT in Vietnam, it's set up some decades ago, and Hanoi was a little bit more recently, but also some fair share of time. How would you share about, I guess, education's there because people want to develop more skills. They want to develop more education. So I'd love for you to comment about how Melbourne-based individuals who are interested in contributing to that knowledge industry in Vietnam, how can they be useful? How can they contribute in their own way?
Great question, actually, and it's probably not a simple answer, and Natalie touched on it, that AusCham has this 20 industries in its little wheel of fortune for Vietnam, and it's probably just like what you think you could do in the sector. Lucky for me, I actually worked at RMIT and had a great career there. If you want to go teach at RMIT, you'll need a PhD, so you have to do a little bit more study if you haven't got that PhD level. But there's also other opportunities in education for people who are educational technologists or student services areas or in executive education, that type of field. We did touch on agriculture. So yeah, agriculture is a huge sector in Vietnam. It used to employ something like 80% of the population. But there's this new tech in agriculture. So I'd encourage any scientists in the room or people in ag, if you're thinking about a career, move across to Vietnam into that space. That technology is taking, I guess, hold in that country. The IT sector is booming. And again, when I first moved to Vietnam in 2012, Intel had a small presence. There are a few other players in Vietnam, but now I look at it in 2025, and I'll talk with the NAB Innovation Centre. It's huge over there. FPT Software is a massive player in the marketplace. So people with that IT background, there's a huge market for your skills and skill set and mindset to actually go work into Vietnam. Huge opportunities in that country. So you have to think a little bit differently. Don't just think in the box that Vietnam's still this small developing country. It's huge. Lots of potential, nearly 100 million people, professional communications, marketing. They're huge firms over in Vietnam these days. So I guess take the plunge, take the step. Be brave, take that Vietjet flight if you get a free one. If you don't, buy your ticket and move to Vietnam.
Very good advice. And I just want to give a shout out to our partners, Janus. You'll hear from her in a little bit, Anna and Lei, the team from Janus. They recruit across so many different industries. So if you don't know where to start, you can ask one of these three, but you can also ask Janus. You can hear from them later. I'd like to go to Alina now. I'd love for you to share about navigating these dual markets. Australian companies seem, hungry to grow, but they don't know where to grow, ironically, because perhaps they're conservative. What's that big pitch that you're giving to them in regards to opportunities in Vietnam?
Well, we have much more talent in Vietnam compared to Australia, like we've heard many times here. But the key way to be able to really leverage and position Vietnam as a space of opportunity, obviously there's going to be challenges, but how do you spin the challenges to your advantage is another question that I always think about when I'm speaking to my clients. So it's about understanding what are their current fears. You can say, yes, just leap into it and take that flight to Vietnam, especially if it's free. But you still need to do your due diligence and understand what are those gaps that you currently have and what are the assumptions that you're currently making that you need to go down to the ground, speak to the people, the locals, speak to the people who are bridging, the countries together, and get an understanding of what is that mindset that they have in Vietnam that might be different to what we currently hold in Australia. So with Australian businesses or entrepreneurs, and I think just the way that we've grown up in Australia, especially if you've gone through a corporate background, it's almost like you have a corporate mindset training, and it's very hard to break free from that. And it comes with a lot of advantages, which is having structure. There's a lot of clarity or transparency in your conversations. In Vietnam, individuals need to be very agile because it's constantly shifting and changing, and so you need to be quick on your feet almost to adapt to these changes, or you get left behind. And so the way that I've noticed a lot of the Vietnamese counterparts have worked is that they like to make decisions quicker, although there's a lot of nuances under that with building relationships. So you need to have a lot of relationship capital basically and spend time nurturing the trust to be able to build the partnerships and enable yourself to enter the Vietnam market knowing what you're getting into, not blindly.
Nurturing relationships, very good one. I've been almost 10 years in Vietnam, still figuring that one out. All right, so I'd love, this is a question for everyone, and I'll start with Natalie on the far side here. If you can go back to the start of your career, starting in Vietnam specifically, what's one piece of advice you'd give that you wish you had at the beginning?
Yeah, great question, and probably only something I've come to in the last year. So I've been in Vietnam now, not nudging almost 7 years. I think what's made us at Ascending Strategies, and I also see it from experienced Australian businesses operating in Vietnam, 10, 15, 20-year players. And may I just say, advice from all of the chambers and Vietnamese is incredibly gracious, forthcoming advice. I have felt so welcomed by multiple business communities and Vietnamese companies to do business. But I would say the biggest learning I have had is look for win-win solutions. And what I mean by that is, in the first couple of years, I had this thought that it was about bringing Australian companies to Vietnam for some of these sectors that we've talked about. And that has worked over time, but actually what has worked far better is also understanding what does that Vietnamese company need. And some of the companies we're working with have got market share or significant share in Vietnam. And they are looking for an opportunity in Australia. And so there is this opportunity to do two things: commercially, win-win, and secondly, learn relationships from each other. So what's happened for me in working with FPT, Savills, who have, obviously you're probably familiar with Savills in Australia, but they're also very, very big and dominant in Vietnam. And now more recently, Hoa Binh Construction Group, is they are also looking for, could you help us in Australia? And what are they really looking for? Lots of different things, but invariably, top of the list, relationships. Could you help open a door for us? We are dominant in Vietnam. We know that, and we've got our strategy and we've got our scale plans. What could we do in Australia, and how do we have to customise that? In supporting that, which we're doing frequently, they in turn support us in Vietnam to open doors, but learn the culture, learn the language, learn how to do business. So fast forward from the time I landed in Vietnam to now, I'm all about win-win. If somebody helps me in business, and I must say also personally, and Kat Tal's one of the first friends we made when our family moved to Vietnam, is look for the win-win. And perhaps even more gentler than win-win is look after one another in mutually beneficial ways.
Very good. Good advice. I would agree with that. Philip, same question to you. Something to start your career. If you were to go back, what's that one piece?
Yeah, actually, and just touch on what you're saying there, and I think that's what I learned over that 10 years in Vietnam, that it's actually family first, business second. So don't treat Vietnam as a business without actually building those relationships. It's really important to spend time with those coffees. The Vietnamese coffee is filtered slowly. It's not espresso, okay? So, and that's how the relationships work. It's a very slow process of building relationships, building those networks. Then you build bridges and you build a business. Don't try and make a profit in 1 month. You'll fail. So take that long term. And I think another good analogy too about Vietnam is the country's different. Here we are in Australia looking into Vietnam. It's not just one market, there's multiple markets into Vietnam, and you need to have a different mindset, the way that you'll tackle business in Ho Chi Minh City, into Da Nang, into Hanoi. And I'll use another food analogy around pho. So the pho in Saigon, it's a little bit sweet, it's kind of fresh, it's clear. Then you go to Hanoi, it's a bit more salty, it's a bit more complex, it's a bit more traditional. So that's how pho in Vietnam, that's how your relationships in Vietnam. Think a little bit differently about the way you do business in Vietnam. So it's slower, it's family, and it's traditional.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too. I never had coffee before moving to Vietnam. I moved when I was 23. I'm 32 now. I have 2 or 3 coffees a day, way too many. And actually, yeah, I know exactly. And actually, just on that note, I started my podcast that I now host because people kept asking me for coffees, and it was unsustainable, both to my wallet and time. So I actually ended up hosting a podcast to replace the coffee.
Yeah.
And so yeah, start a podcast, I guess. I don't know. Or if you want to meet me, just go on my podcast. Coffee is unlikely, but very important though, with that said. Lena, over to you. One piece of advice to start your career, if you were to offer it to someone out there in the audience.
Can I just quickly add on to
Yes,
the other two
please.
said before? So last year, when I was in Vietnam quite often to really be down on the ground, understand what are the challenges, who are the people that you need to get to know. It's quite different to networking that we do in Australia, where it could be quite transparent. These are the decision makers, for example. So one quote that really stuck with me, and for those who know Vietnamese, is "Ăn cơm mới, nói chuyện cũ," which basically translates to eating new rice, speaking about old memories. And that was probably the key analogy or quote that really stuck with how you would do business in Vietnam. It's not as transactional. I guess trust is always going to be important for any partnership or any business that you do. You do want to be working with people that you trust at the end of the day. But in Vietnam, it does go back to family and common values. And I really hone into the values piece, because even if there's a lot of differences between how we do business between Australia and Vietnam, as humans in general, when you're able to find that common ground, especially when it comes to your values, there's an easier foundation for you to build upon. And that's where the long-lasting, trusting relationships in business is done. And it's, eating rice with new people, but talking about old memories to find the common ground.
Very good, and very good advice from all three. I hope that's a very good takeaway for everyone in the audience looking to do business in Vietnam. It surely was for me. Thank you so much, Natalie, Alina, and Philip for contributing on today's panel. Thank you again.
Thanks, Al.
And I'm giving you some bottles of wine.